Alright, welcome back guys. The past few weeks have been pretty hectic, but there's a bunch of new stuff in store for today's devlog, so I'm pretty excited. If you're new here, Shrine Wars is a multiplayer base defense game that I've been working on where 50 players build and defend a fortress against an endless army of monsters for as long as possible. Once you die, you become a monster, so you end up playing on both sides. There's 6 classes in the game for now, 3 human and 3 monster, and I'm planning to have people start playtesting in late November. So if you're interested in becoming a playtester and want to join the community, check out our Discord link below. Let's get into the devlog. So I finally added the human character model into the game. I'm going for a stylized look, sort of like Spellbreak or Breath of the Wild. So I've decided to use cell shading for the characters, armor, and weapons. If you're wondering how I got this look, I'm just using the flat kit shaders, which makes setting up this type of look pretty simple. You can definitely achieve a similar look using the shader graph, but flat kit comes with so many nice features and it's been a huge time saver, so I just went with that. I'm obviously going to add character customization later down the road, so you can change the face, hair, eyes, and skin color and stuff like that. But for now, I'm pretty happy with this. Anyways, I'm going to be using this model as the base for all of the human classes, which are currently the Warlock, Hunter, and Slayer. I also got in the new Undead character model, which will obviously be used for the Undead monster class. Each of the monster classes will have unique models. It's only the human classes that will share the same base model. The Undead class is basically a skeletal archer. I've been playing around with white and black versions, but can't really decide which one to pick right now, so I'm probably going to go with the dark one, since white skeletons are super generic looking. Either way, let me know what you guys prefer, and we'll see from there. So the next thing up is the new loadout system. Basically, whenever you join a game from the beginning, you spawn in as a human, so you can pick between the 3 human classes, and you'll play as the class you pick until you die, and then, respawn as a monster. And every time you respawn as a monster, you can pick any of the 3 monster classes to play. I designed the human and monster versions of the loadout UI in Adobe XD. The only difference between the two is that monsters don't have item selection slots, but that might change if I add monster-specific items and consumables to the game. I also mocked up what the item selection will look like, and by the way, if you're wondering why I do all of this, since it probably seems like a waste of time to mock everything before implementing it, it's because you catch a lot of edge cases while mocking the design. Like this one, where I forgot that once an item slot is selected, there should be some sort of indication in the item selection menu that, this item is selected. It's a lot cheaper to catch all of these cases and iterate a bunch here than to do it in Unity. So the code for this was relatively straightforward, but there was still a boatload of it. Basically, I just have a bunch of UI controller classes whose only role is to take in some data and present it on the UI. And there's one main loadout class that's the central location for this data and handles serializing and deserializing the data when we want to transfer it across the network. I noticed that a lot of Unity game devs couple all of their data handling and UI logic in one place. And I found that that's a really easy way to set yourself up for headaches down the road. Instead, you can just decouple the two and sort of treat your UI code as a big black box that takes in some data as input and pops out a nice UI so that whatever feeds in that data can live somewhere else. Another thing I did recently was redesign the menu system using some of the principles from a Unity talk on menu systems. Basically, we have a menu manager that, manages all the menus in the game. What it does internally is maintain a stack of menus with only the top one being active at any given time. So for example, when I open a menu, it gets pushed to the top of the stack and whatever's below gets deactivated. Then let's say I close this menu. It gets popped off the stack and whatever was previously on top gets shown. This helps keep your scene clean, saving a lot of memory usage depending on how complex your menus are. And it reduces draw calls because if you have a bunch of menus active, even though you might think only the top one gets rendered, actually all of them cause draw calls. So yeah, this can be really nice for performance. The menus themselves all inherit from a base menu, which saves so much time because you don't have to re-implement the same things over and over again. Anyways, I've rambled long enough about the implementation. Let me just show you what it looks like in game now. So this main menu is temporary, but let's just say for now I spawn in as a human. This is more or less what it'll look like. So you can select a class, pick your weapon and armor, and then you can pick your items and consumables. From a monster's point of view, this is what it'll look like. You just pick a class, pick your weapon and armor, and that's it. You load in. So we've got some new character models in, so everything's great, right? Well, not really. I tested out the game with multiple clients, and the movement and animations look like absolute garbage. I think there's either no interpolation or something's going wrong because I was using the default network transform and network animator, which by default syncs over all the animation data 10 times per second per player, and despite that, it still looked pretty bad. So the first thing I decided to do was use Smooth Sync to improve the movement, which is basically a drop-in replacement for the default network transform that you get with Mirror or UNet. It made a huge improvement to the movement, but the animations still look terrible. So I read through some forum posts about the network animator, and I saw one post by the creator of Mirror, which is the networking package I'm using, and he said that he doesn't even use the network animator himself, and instead just derives the animation on the client manually. If that's the case, I just decided to implement the network animations myself and start with the movement. Now I'm compressing the movement vector to two values representing whether the player is moving forwards or backwards, and to the left or right. Basically, for the move horizontal, if the value is -1, we're moving left relative to ourselves. If it's 0, we're not moving at all horizontally, and if it's 1, we're moving to the right. For move vertical, it's the same thing. If the value is 1, we're moving forward. If the value is 0, we're not moving vertically. And if it's -1, we're moving backwards. And this is all relative to the player. Then whenever these values change, we send them to the server, which then sends them to every other client. Actually, looking at this now, I could probably even compress all of this down to 1 byte, but I'll probably save that optimization for later. For the other animations, things are pretty straightforward. For example, whenever a player equips or unequips an item, that information is sent to the server, and then the server sends that to every client, which then plays the appropriate animation. Alright, so that's more than enough technical stuff. Let's talk about the new weapons. So, as I said before, there's going to be 6 classes in the game. Each class will have its own unique weapons and armor. So I've started out by adding the default basic weapons for each class. Warlocks will use staffs, or staves, I guess is the right word for it. Hunters will use crossbows, slayers will use swords and maybe axes. Reapers will use scythes, undeads will use bows, and void mages will use polearms and spellblades. To texture these weapons, I'm using color palettes, which means I have one image file with a big grid of colors that'll be the texture used for most, if not every item in the game. And this makes texturing and iterating very easy because you can easily go back and change things. Also, I'm no artist, so this method is pretty idiot-proof and still leads to a nice result. I also set up equip and unequip animations for 3 different weapon types. The default weapons, which includes, things like swords, staffs, scythes, and basically anything that you normally hold that's shaped somewhat like a stick. And I also added variations for crossbows and bows, since crossbows are held a little differently and bows need to be held on the left hand, not the right. After importing all of that into Unity, it looks pretty decent for now. Obviously he's cutting himself through the head, but just ignore that for now. I'm gonna fix that later by using different animations based on whatever weapon you're holding. Anyways, so that's pretty much what I got done over the past few weeks. I wanted to take a minute to answer some questions I've been getting. Some are pretty general and some are related to Shrine Wars specifically. So the first one is, when did you start learning Unity, and do you have any tips for beginners? So my answer to that is I'm still somewhat of a beginner. I only started learning Unity back in March or April, basically right around when COVID got really serious and everything shut down. And when I got started, it was a lot easier for me because I do have a programming background. I graduated with a degree in computer science and my full-time job is software development. So that definitely makes a big difference. What I'd say is that if you don't know how to code, you're really facing an uphill battle, and that, all the alternative node-based programming assets out there like Bolt or Playmaker are kind of trash compared to just using C#. So I would strongly recommend that you just bite the bullet and start learning C#. There's many great ways to learn it nowadays, like the official Microsoft documentation or YouTubers like Mosh, Tim Corey, or even Brackeys. Although sadly Brackeys is now over, as I'm sure many of you recently heard. Anyways, knowing how to code is just such a huge asset, so I would start with that. You're gonna end up having to learn it anyways. For the actual Unity specific stuff, honestly I would just start with Brackeys again and then check out Jason Wyman after you get most of the basics down. He makes stuff so easy to understand, and he covers many topics better than anybody else, and some topics that nobody else even talks about, like design principles, testing, and programming patterns. After you've got all of that down, you just gotta start building stuff and be a bit resourceful with Google. Alright, next question is, are you planning to make Shrine Wars free to play? So, at this point in time, the answer is yes. I'm thinking about going free to play with an in-game cosmetics shop, and my reasons for this are pretty simple. Basically, by making the game free to play, I'm significantly reducing the barrier to entry for the game, meaning that if you want to play the game with your friends, you don't have to go through the torture of convincing them to drop $20 or $40 or whatever. So it's just a lot easier to spread the word and get people to at least try the game out. And this will end up being really beneficial for the game itself, because the lifeblood of any multiplayer game is its player count, and doing anything to limit that is just stupid in my opinion, especially because I don't have the fat marketing budget that a AAA studio has. As for monetization, I really think that free-to-play with in-game cosmetics is fair for both the devs and the players, as long as the in-game shop doesn't become pay-to-win garbage. I think revenue from cosmetics and other non-pay-to-win purchases will be more than enough to sustain ongoing development on the game and hopefully, expand and hire more people. I am open to changing my mind on this though, so depending on what people think, and also if I ever end up signing with a publisher or something like that, things might change. But at least for now, that's my overall mentality about monetization. So the next question is, why'd you pick Unity over Unreal? And that decision probably sounds even more stupid, especially with the announcement of Unreal Engine 5. It actually took me a while to decide. Most of the advice I found on the internet and YouTube ended up being pretty useless and inaccurate. Maybe the only guy on YouTube that covered the topic pretty fairly was Pontypants. He actually ended up going with Unreal Engine for his game. By the way, if any of you had any doubts, building your own game engine is just totally out of the question. I'm here to build games, not engines. Anyways, the reason I picked Unity was because of C#, and that's pretty much what it came down to. Unreal is probably a better engine overall, but they really only give you two options, Blueprints and C++, both of which suck in my opinion. I tried using Blueprints, and I have to say, visual scripting is just not for me. I can write the same code in C# 5 times faster and end up with a way more readable result. Also, C++, which is the other option. Actually, I was excited about using this, but Unreal's documentation is just lacking, and C# is just such a nice language to work with. Most of my time will be spent coding anyways, so I'd rather do it in a fantastic language like C#, which I can also use for other parts of the backend, like matchmaking, lobbies, analytics, authentication, and so on. So yeah. Alright, so the last question is, when is the game coming out and how can I playtest it? Well, as I'm sure you can tell, we're still really early in development, but I'm hoping to have people playtest starting in November. And I'll be picking people from our Discord for that, so if you're interested in joining, check out that link below. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this devlog. I know it was a lot longer than the last two, but I'm not sure whether you guys would prefer longer ones like this going forward or shorter ones like before. Let me know down in the comments. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to help me out, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.